Assalamu alaikum. One of the toughest challenges that you and I face is convincing people who are absolutely beholden to their fictitious beliefs that those beliefs are in fact unfounded. And the Qur'an, in fact, makes mention of this phenomenon. And I was just going through chapter 6 of the Holy Qur'an, and I came upon a verse, and it took me a while to make sense of that verse because the verse is not easily translated. And I want to show you the verse, but before I show you the verse, let me first show you the translation that most translators, or almost all the translators, have come up with. And then you can see for yourself that it appears difficult to really grasp the meaning when you're trying to translate it. And then some of the wording in this verse also appears at other places in the Quran. So there's no doubt that this is an important statement that God makes in this verse, that Allah makes in this verse. Because that statement, that refrain, that phrase is repeated elsewhere, I think about 3 times in the rest of the Quran. So let me just quickly start by showing you the verse, and then I'm going to give you a short understanding how I see this verse based on the most contemporary or modern research on how humanity, how knowledge, how understanding works. I'm going to then offer you that explanation. But let's just look at how translators see this verse firstly. Okay, so this is Islam Awakened. It's a number of translations that where you can read translations side by side. And I think I've got more than 20 translations of the same verb here. You can see Shabir Ahmad, Abdul Halim. Even those who are slightly non-mainstream will also be a Rashad Khalifa, Sher Ali, and then even Orientalist translations. So they all here. Not all, I think there are some that are not here, but let me quickly give you the Arabic first of the verse, and then we'll proceed to look at how translators have translated this verse. It's chapter 6, An'am, verse 20. الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم الذين خسروا أنفسهم فهو لا يؤمنون. الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم الذين خسروا أنفسهم فهم لا يؤمنون. Now that verse comes after the previous verse. I just need to place it in context for you. The previous verse states that He is the one God. It ends off with the words, He is the one God, and behold, far from be it from me to ascribe divinity as you do to other than Him. So the operating word here is to ascribe false divinity, right? False divinity, or to ascribe divinity to others, to people who are not worthy of divinity. And then the next verse then continues, right? So the previous verse ends with false divinities, right? So how have they translated this verse? Let's just quickly look at Muhammad Asad, who is a very accepted mainstream translation. And that translation reads, they unto whom we have vouchsafed revelation aforetime know this, as they know their own children. Yet those of them who have squandered their own selves, it is they who refuse to believe. Now the squandered their own selves is a translation of khasiru anfusahum. The word khasara comes from, it's a common thing, khusara, it means to lose, for something to go lost, or state of loss, actually. State of loss. Right. Then the recent or contemporary translation by Mustafa Khattab, which is sometimes referred to, which he refers to as the clear Qur'an, it translates that as those to whom we gave the scripture recognize him to be a true prophet as they recognize their own children. Those who have ruined themselves will never believe. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a problem with it too, because they're so different. Knew this as they know their own children, yet those of them who have squandered their own selves, it is they who refuse to believe. Right, so again there, to be a true as they recognize their children. So then there's a bit of a disjuncture between the first part of the verse and the second part. Those whom we gave the scripture recognize him to be a true prophet as they recognize their own children. Then we look at, let's just quickly skip a few and go to Yusuf Ali. Those to whom we have given the book know this as they know their own sons. Those who have lost their own souls refuse therefore to believe. And then I'm going to do Shaik here quickly. Those whom we have given the book recognize him as they recognize their sons. As for those who have lost their souls, they will not believe. Then Layla Bakhtia, those to whom we gave the book recognize it as they recognize their own children. But those, they who lost themselves, they believe not. But those, they who lost themselves, they believe not. Okay, Layla Bakhtia is the American, American Arab or Persian, I'm not so sure now, Western scholar, also contemporary. So, let me quickly give you a summary of what you see, this verse, chapter 6, verse 20, says that, in simple terms, people were given the book and they know they know it the way they know their own sons. But the commentators and the translators are in somewhat of a quandary as to what really it is. Or so now some of them will say it is the true message. They see the truth as though it's the son. And it took me quite a while, and I must say actually hours to really get to make sense of the words, so that all the words in fact will fit in and make sense. So I want you to take a look at this then. الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم. Those whom we gave the book became as familiar with such co-opted entities. You see, it says أبناءهم يعرفونه, they know it. And that it there, that subject is not clear. So the subject goes back to the previous verse, which is, say also, but I dissociate myself from entities you co-opt along with God. I dissociate myself from entities you co-opt along with God. And then it makes perfect sense. Those whom we gave the book became as familiar with it, such co-opted entities, in other words, as they were familiar with their own children. So what this verse really is saying is that people who have embraced, people of the book, الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, those who were given the book, Utul Kitab, some places the Qur'an will say, those who were given the book previously, they attached themselves, or they became as familiar with co-opted entities, with false, invented, sacred entities or objects along with God, as familiar as they were with their own children. So they made the co-opted entities, they made those entities household names. They made those entities as real as their own children. And if you look at the Muslims today, now I'm going to bring it to us, I'm going to make it real for you. What we are arguing, some of us who are revising and trying to do the hard work of cleaning up our understanding of this book, what we are saying is that people who have been given the Qur'an, who have been given the Kitab, even the Qur'an, the Bible, whatever, they became as familiar with other entities, with characters of history, with sacred personalities, with co-equaled or co-opted individuals whom they give immense power and authority. And they've become as familiar with those co-opted imposters, which are really imposters in their own minds. They've become as familiar with those imposters as they have become, as they are with their own children. They see those imposters, they see those historical false figures as real as they see their own children. Now let's read it again. Those whom we gave the book became as familiar with such co-opted entities as they were familiar with their own children. And so I want you to see how beautifully this Quran illustrates contemporary reality, where you are trying to convince a Muslim or a Christian to turn away from co-opting Paul and Abu Huraira, or you are trying to convince a Jewish person to stop co-opting the power and the sacred authority of the rabbinical law into the law of God. But he puts his rabbi, he puts his church, his pope, he puts his imam, his maulana, his sahabi, his muhaddith, his mufassir, whether it is Abu Huraira, whether it is Bukhari, whether it is the Apostle Paul, they intrude, they impose these fictitious deities, these fictitious authorities. And I'm not saying these people don't exist, but these people never asked to be worshipped as though they are God. Imam Shafi'i never asked to turn his books into divinely authorized books. And so let's read this again. Those whom we gave the book became as familiar with such co-opted entities as they were familiar with their own children. Can you see the meaning coming through, my dear friends? الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابِ يَعْرِفُونَهُ. And the who there goes back to the مِمَّا تُشْرِكُونَ, the shirk, the co-option, the false deities. Right? That is the subject or the object in here. They know that co-option, that incorporated false authorities, as though those authorities could have been their own children, as well as those they could have known their own children. They are familiar with those. They've made those entities as real as they make their own children. I hope you can see this meaning here. I hope you can see it, and if you're an Arabic speaker, you're welcome to raise the issue with me in the comment section. Please feel free. And if you read the existing mufassirs, the tafsirs, the ancient books, they do agree with me that this verse does pertain to the Ahlul Kitab. Right. So, but now, the only way to make sense of this is to say that the people of the book, the people who were given the book, have become so familiar with false deities, as familiar as they are in fact with their own children, as sure and as common as their own children are to them, have they made these false impostering deities. Right. But now that is not where the verse ends. That is not where the verse ends. The verse continues, and a very powerful corroborating part of the verse follows. They lost. Now here again, I'm going to show you the meaning that is given to the rest of the verse. And the translators translate the rest of the verse as follows. But they who lost themselves, they believe not. Yet those who have lost their souls will never believe. Right? That is what T.B. Irving says. The Study Qur'an says, those who have lost their souls, they do not believe. Let's look at a few others. Ahmad Ali says, but those who are lost of soul do not believe. And you see, this is the problem that you have when you try to read the Quran. Maulana Maududi says, but those who have courted their own ruin will not believe. Monotheist group says, those who lost their souls, they do not believe. Okay, so let me take you back to the translation that I'm offering you here. And it's very simple. Alladhina khasiru anfusahum fahum la yu'minun. Alladhina, those, the ones. Khasiru means to lose, to forfeit. Anfusahum. Now, anfusahum is the technical word here. And now, anfusahum could mean yourself, your person, your individuality. Fahum la yu'minun. So, this is the translation I'm offering you. They lost their own individuality and will not embrace truth. They lost their own individuality and they will not embrace truth. I've translated khasiru anfusahum as they lost their own individuality. Now, you're going to ask me why. Why not translate it to they lost their own selves, they lost their own persons. I don't think they lost their own souls is a good translation, because there's a word in the Quran for soul, ruh. But the word nafs is normally used for self or person or your own individuality, you see. So let me then take you to the next or the final stage in this explanation and offer you my explanation here. Here we go. And I want you to keep an open mind to think about how I've explained this verse to you, that it is very difficult to persuade people who are as attached to their false beliefs as they are to their own children. That is what the verse says. There are people who are as attached to the false sacred gods, to the false gods. They are as attached to those false gods as they are to their children. They love them, they know them, they feel as close to them as they feel to their own children. And so let me show you the explanation of why we say those people have lost their own individuality. And I'm going to take you to some of the work that I've sometimes covered in this. And this is and it incorporates my research around humanity, individuality, and the psyche, the agency, individual agency. Now, quickly, don't get confused. It's a very simple thing. Focus on the left only. Focus on the left. Don't worry with the two right bubbles here, to the bubbles on the right. Just focus on the bubbles on the left. And you see, we live in a world where there are two extremes. There's the group say. Now, it's just a way of putting group power. It's the say of the group. So it's the power we afford to the group in our beliefs and in our practices. And then there's individual say. And that is again where the individual wields more power. So we live in a world where historically, if you are in the West, if you live in the West, then you would instinctively have a situation where there's greater power to the individual. So the individual has more say, right? That is in the West. In certain Eastern societies, the group has greater say. Okay, are you with me? So that is the two bubbles here, or the two ellipses, is that we have greater say in the West, the individual has greater say, and in some Eastern societies, not all, the group has more say, or the culture has more say. Now, if you live in India, you know what I'm talking about. The culture, or in Pakistan, or Iran, or whatever, in Malaysia to some extent, you will know what I'm saying, is that the group has immense power over the actions and the decisions of the individual. Whereas if you go to London or to New York or to, I guess South Africa in these days also, but it depends in which part of countries like South Africa you go, then the individual has more say. Like, we have a very multicultural environment, and so in some pockets in our community, the group holds sway. But in other pockets, again, or in other sections of our society, the individual holds sway. So this is like social science research, right? You can read Margaret Archer's work, and there's a number of other scholars that will dissect and discuss this phenomenon. But it's a dynamic interaction between the cultural structure, or what the group says, and what the individual says. That's a dynamic interaction, right? So make this practical for you. If I'm a member of a Muslim community in New York, my community will have a reasonable amount of say over my behavior or my actions, but I guess I will, as an individual, still override most of what they say. And if I want to change and just condemn and differ with everything, I will go ahead and do it, right? So the individual has more say there. But if I'm a member of a Muslim community in, let's say, India, in Surat province, in Klera village, in the province of Gujarat in India, then I better watch what I do, what I say, because I need to respect the wishes of my family, my elders, my culture, my priest. So there, the group has more say, and that is just how I want to make it clear for you. But in the real world, there's a dynamic interaction between group say and individual say, although on some. All right. So, where individual agency or the individual is stronger, that is where you have in the West. That is what you have in the West, right? Oh, and it's changing, Where the culture or the community has greater sway, has more say, then the individual becomes the lesser. Right. Now, what happens is, and here we come to the verse now. Let me just show you the verse again, and then I'm going to drop the final blow here and really give you a crisp and clear understanding of what this verse is. Those to whom we gave the book became as familiar with such co-opted entities, with false beliefs, as they were familiar with their own children. They lost their own individuality and will not embrace truth. Now, let me jump from there. They lost their own individuality. It means that individual agency became merged with a cultural structure. Can you see what I mean? Individual agency, it was merged, it was annihilated into the cultural structure. So they lost their individuality, and that is what the verse is clearly stating, is that they now no longer hold their own individual ideas, but they simply act in accordance with what their culture, their community, their people, their priests, their holy men, the word on the street, whatever. They've lost their own individuality and they now purely echo. They only echo what the cultural powers that be state. Now you see there's two types of power in the world. There's cultural power and there's political power. So you must see this. I've used cultural power, but there's political power also. And the individual can get lost within any one of the two or in both. Right? So the individual, say, is gone. Individuals say, gone. Culture has taken over. The culture controls. The individual is gone. And as the Qur'an says, الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. So now that they've lost their individuality, the culture speaks for them. Their false beliefs are ingrained, are permanently entrenched in their hearts, and you will never, never, never get them out of that trap unless you can recover the man, you can recover the woman, and make that woman or that man think for themselves. But that's a tough battle. That's a very tough battle. And the Quran says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. They will not embrace, they will not accept this message because they haven't got an individuality anymore. They don't think for themselves. They allow the group to think for them. Can you see how beautifully does that not make sense, my dear friends? Don't you think that is a much better way of looking at this verse? So I leave that with you, and please go and read it and ponder over it and see if it makes sense for you. This, in summary, people become as attached to their false gods, the invented authorities, as they are to their own children. And you can't help them out of that because they've merged or they've suspended their own thinking, and they've merged their own thinking with the thinking of the group. So groupthink has taken over and the individuality is gone. May Allah protect us and guide us.